Billionaire betrayed his wife. 10 years later, their son arrived at his wedding. One punch changed everything. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family channel. May the Almighty bless every woman with endless strength, unwavering grace, and a heart so pure it touches everyone around her. May her courage inspire, her kindness heal, and her love illuminate every life she touches. May she always feel cherished, her efforts honored, and her spirit celebrated. You are the pillars of love, the silent heroes who hold families together, and the light that never fades. My beautiful family, I see you are watching even without liking or commenting. Tell me, have you forgotten your brother Mr. Peter? Or do you think I am done? Please reply. Your trust and love are everything to me. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, I am with Mr. Peter. The contractions came in waves that made Mara Beatrice grip the hospital bed rails until her knuckles turned pale against her dark skin. She was alone. The nurses had stopped asking about the father 3 hours ago when they saw the look in her eyes. The labor room smelled like antiseptic and broken promises, and Mara focused on the clock on the wall, watching the seconds tick by as her body prepared to bring her son into a world that had already rejected him before his first breath. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a constant reminder that this moment was happening in the harshest light possible. No soft candles, no romantic atmosphere, just sterile reality and the sound of her own breathing echoing off cold walls. Through the window, she could see the city skyline where Tim lived his perfect life, completely unaware that his son was about to enter the world. Or maybe he knew. Maybe he just didn't care. The door opened with a sound that made Mara's blood run cold. Tim Foster walked in wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, his mother Gwendolyn gliding behind him like a spectre in pearls and cold judgment. A lawyer followed, briefcase in hand, and Mara knew immediately this wasn't a reunion. This was an execution. This was the moment they would try to erase her and the life growing inside her. Miss Beatrice, the lawyer began, not even looking at her writhing form. His voice was clinical, detached, like he was reading a grocery list. We need you to sign some documents. Another contraction hit, stronger than the last. Mara screamed, her body arching off the bed. Pain radiated through her entire being, white-hot and consuming, but worse than the physical agony was seeing Tim's face turned deliberately away from her suffering. He stared at a spot on the wall like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Now is not the time, she gasped between breaths, her voice raw. Gwendolyn stepped forward, her face a mask of elegant disgust. Her perfume was suffocating in the small room, expensive and cloying. Now is precisely the time. Before that child is born and you start making claims on my son's fortune. Before you can parade this mistake around for sympathy and money like some common gold digger. Tim stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot. He wouldn't look at her, wouldn't look at the woman whose bed he'd shared for 2 years, who carried his child, who he'd whispered promises to in the dark, promises that now felt like cruel jokes told by a stranger wearing his face. The lawyer placed papers on the tray table beside Mara's bed with a crisp snap. This document acknowledges that the child is yours alone. Timothy Foster has no legal obligation, financial or otherwise. You agree never to contact the Foster family or make any claims of paternity. This is a legally binding agreement. Get out! Mara whispered, her voice trembling with rage and pain. Sign it, and we'll leave, Gwendolyn said, her tone suggesting this was a generous offer. She pulled out a thick envelope from her purse and dropped it on the bed like it was contaminated. There's $10,000. More than generous for a mistake. More than a girl like you would see in a year of honest work. The word hit Mara like a physical blow. Mistake. Another contraction came, stronger this time, tearing through her. The baby was coming soon. Her son was coming into a world where his own father called him a mistake, where his grandmother looked at him as a problem to be solved with money and legal documents and cold dismissal. I said, get out! Mara's voice filled the room, raw and powerful despite her pain, despite her vulnerability, despite everything. A nurse poked her head in, alarmed, but Gwendolyn waved her away with an imperious hand. "Tim," Gwendolyn turned to her son, her voice sharp. Tell her what we discussed." Finally, Tim turned from the window. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his voice was steady, too steady, rehearsed, like he'd practiced this moment in front of a mirror until he could deliver it without feeling. "Sign the papers, Mara. This is better for everyone." "Better for you, you mean," Mara said. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with sweat. Her hospital gown was soaked through, clinging to her skin. "You're really going to do this? While I'm in labor with your child? While your son is trying to enter this world? This is the man you are?" "It's not my child if you sign those papers," Tim said quietly, and the lawyer nodded as if this logic made perfect sense, as if a signature could erase biology and love and 2 years of whispered dreams. Gwendolyn smiled, a cold thing that never reached her eyes. "My son has a future, a destiny. You were a phase, an unfortunate lapse in judgment that we're willing to pay you to forget. Take the money, Miss Beatrice. It's the best offer you'll ever get." Mara grabbed the papers with shaking hands and tore them in half. Then in half again. The sound of ripping paper felt like freedom. She took the envelope of money and threw it at them with all the strength she had left, bills scattering across the sterile floor like confetti at the world's saddest celebration. "You want me to erase your son?" Mara's voice was deadly calm now, even as another contraction built like a tsunami. "I'll raise him myself, and one day, Tim Foster, one day he's going to find you, and when he does, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember the day you chose your mother's money over your own blood. I hope it haunts you every single day for the rest of your miserable life." The lawyer scrambled to pick up the torn papers, his professional composure cracking. Gwendolyn's face twisted in fury, the elegant mask slipping to reveal something ugly underneath. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure you never work in this city. I'll make sure every door closes in your face. You and that bastard will have nothing, nothing." "We already have nothing," Mara said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The difference is, we'll survive it with our dignity intact. Will you? Can you look at yourself in the mirror, knowing what you've done here today?" Tim opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked like he wanted to say something, anything, but his mother's hand on his arm silenced whatever courage he might have found in that moment. Gwendolyn grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door with surprising strength. "Let's go, Timothy. We've wasted enough time on this trash. She'll come crawling back when reality hits." "I'll never come back," Mara said. "Not for your money, not for your name, not for anything." They left. The lawyer, the mother, the father of her child. The door closed with a finality that felt like a coffin lid slamming shut on everything Mara had hoped for. She was alone again, but this time the loneliness felt different, sharper, more permanent, like a door had closed that would never open again, no matter how hard she might push against it in moments of weakness. The next contraction came, and the nurses rushed in, their faces a mixture of sympathy and professional concern. Time blurred into a haze of pain and pushing and primal screaming that came from somewhere deep in her soul. And then, in the grey light of dawn, her son entered the world with a cry that sounded like a battle roar, like a warrior announcing his arrival. "It's a boy," the nurse said, placing the tiny, perfect creature on Mara's chest. A beautiful, healthy boy. He had Tim's nose, Tim's chin, Tim's long fingers that would probably play piano or throw a ball with the same natural grace. But when he opened his eyes and looked at his mother for the first time, Mara saw a strength there that Tim Foster would never possess. She saw determination. She saw survival. "Tiger," she whispered, kissing his forehead, tasting salt and blood and new beginnings. "Your name is Tiger. Because you're going to be fierce, you're going to be strong, and you're going to roar so loud that everyone who ever doubted us will hear it and know they were wrong." In the corner of the room, forgotten on the floor, $10,000 lay scattered like trash, like the promise of what should have been, like everything Tim Foster would never be. Mara held her son and made a promise that echoed in the empty room. They would never need Tim Foster's money, they would never need his name, but one day he would need them. One day he would beg to know this child, and when that day came, it would be Tiger's choice to make, not Tim's, never Tim's again. He had given up that right the moment he walked out this door. The morning sun rose over the city, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and pink, and in that space that smelled like blood and new beginnings, a warrior was born. The world didn't know it yet, but it would. One day, the world would know Tiger Beatrice's name, and Tim Foster would weep for what he'd thrown away. Chapter 2. The Shelter. The women's shelter on Morrison Street didn't have a sign outside because the kind of women who needed it didn't need advertising. Mara Beatrice sat on the narrow cot with Tiger sleeping in her arms, listening to someone's daughter cry through the thin walls. She'd been here for 3 weeks now, ever since the hospital discharged her with nowhere to go. Her apartment was gone. Her job at the department store was gone. Her family had made it clear she was gone from their lives too. "You embarrassed us," her mother had said over the phone, voice cold as winter. "Chasing after some rich white man like you was special, like you were different from every other fool girl who thought she could trap a billionaire with a baby." "I didn't trap anyone," Mara had replied, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to stay strong. "I loved him." "Then you're a bigger fool than I thought." The line went dead. Mara hadn't called back. Pride and heartbreak formed a knot in her throat that wouldn't dissolve. Now she sat in a room she shared with 3 other women, all with their own stories of men who promised forever and delivered nothing. Yolanda, who'd been here the longest, had given Mara tips on which churches gave out diapers and which food banks didn't ask questions. Carmen knew which temp agencies might hire under the table. Shanice just held Tiger sometimes when Mara needed to cry where her baby couldn't see. "You gonna be okay, honey," Yolanda said from her cot across the room. She was folding donated clothes, sorting them into piles. "I know it don't feel like it, but you will." Mara nodded, but the words felt empty. Every job application she submitted came back rejected. Every interview she managed to get ended with the same apologetic smile and the same excuse. "We'll call you." They never did. What Mara didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Gwendolyn Foster had made good on her threat. One phone call to her country club friends, another to the business association, and Mara Beatrice's name was mud. Not officially blacklisted, nothing illegal, just whispers and knowing looks and doors closing softly but firmly. Tiger stirred in her arms, his tiny mouth seeking her breast. Mara adjusted her shirt and let him feed, marveling at how something so perfect could come from something so broken. His small hand wrapped around her finger, and she felt the weight of her responsibility settle over her shoulders like a mantle. "I got you a lead," Carmen said, returning from her shift at the laundromat. "My cousin's friend needs someone to clean houses. Cash money, no questions." "I'll take it," Mara said immediately. And so she did. At dawn the next morning, Mara strapped Tiger to her chest in a donated baby carrier and took 2 buses to the suburbs where houses had 3-car garages and landscaped lawns. Where people lived the life she'd thought she'd have with Tim. The woman who hired her barely looked at her face, just gave her a list of tasks and pointed to the cleaning supplies. Mara scrubbed toilets while Tiger slept against her chest. She mopped floors and dusted shelves and cleaned windows until her back screamed and her hands cracked from chemicals. She cleaned 6 houses that first week, then 8, then 12. The money was barely enough for the shelter's weekly fee and formula and bus fare, but it was something. It was survival. It was her refusing to break. On a Thursday afternoon, Mara was cleaning a mansion in the old money part of town when she heard a voice behind her. "Child, why are you cleaning my floors with a baby on your back?" Mara turned to find an elderly black woman standing in the doorway, leaning on an ivory cane. She must have been 80, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and eyes that saw everything. "I'm sorry, Mom. The agency said to come today. If the baby's a problem, I can—" "The baby's not a problem. The fact that you're working like this with a newborn is the problem." The woman moved closer, her cane tapping on the hardwood. "What's your name?" "Mara. Mara Beatrice." "And the baby?" "Tiger." "Tiger." The woman smiled. "Strong name. You need a strong name to survive this world. My daughter, she had a soft name, Lily, beautiful but fragile." She studied Mara with those knowing eyes. "Where's the father?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Gone." "Family?" "Gone." "So it's just you and Tiger against the world?" "Yes, Mom." The woman nodded slowly, like she'd suspected as much. "My name is Miss Opal. This is my house, though Lord knows it's too big for one old woman. I had a daughter once, beautiful girl, smart as a whip. She met a man who promised her the world and delivered nothing but pain. She didn't survive her story." Miss Opal's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away with the practice of someone who'd done it many times before. "But you're going to survive yours," she continued. "I can see it in you. You've got that look, that try-me look, that means you're not done fighting yet." "No, ma'am," Mara whispered. "I'm not done." "Good, because I've got a guest house out back. Hasn't been used in years, but it's clean and it's warm, and it's got room for a mother and her baby. You can stay there, no rent. You just keep cleaning for me twice a week, and the place is yours." Mara stared at her, certain she'd heard wrong. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. I don't take charity." "It's not charity, girl. It's investment. I'm investing in you because I see something in you that reminds me of my daughter. Except you're going to make it. You're going to raise that boy, and you're going to show this world what a real woman looks like when she's got her back against the wall." Miss Opal reached out and touched Tiger's head gently. "Besides, this baby needs stability. You going to deny him that because of pride?" Mara felt something crack inside her chest. For the first time since the hospital, she let herself cry in front of someone who wasn't one of the shelter women. Great heaving sobs that she'd been holding back for weeks. All the fear and exhaustion and desperation poured out. Miss Opal held her, one hand on her back, murmuring the kind of comfort only a mother knows how to give. "Thank you," Mara finally managed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're standing on your own 2 feet, raising that boy to be the kind of man his father should have been." That afternoon, Mara packed her few belongings from the shelter. Yolanda, Carmen and Shanice helped her carry everything to the bus stop. "You gonna forget about us now?" Shanice joked, but her eyes were serious. "Never," Mara promised. "We're family now, the kind you choose." They hugged goodbye, and Mara took Tiger to their new home. The guest house was small but perfect. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom with hot water that felt like luxury. To Mara, it felt like a palace. That night she lay in a real bed for the first time in months, Tiger sleeping in a donated crib beside her. Through the window, she could see the lights of the city where Tim Foster lived in his mansion, probably not thinking about her at all. "He doesn't know what he lost," Mara whispered to her sleeping son. "But one day, Tiger, one day he's going to see what we became without him, and it's going to destroy him." Tiger made a small sound in his sleep, like he agreed. Outside, the world continued spinning, indifferent to one woman's pain and one baby's future. But in that small guest house, something was growing, something fierce and unbreakable. Survival looked like a black woman holding her son and refusing to quit, like finding angels in unexpected places, like turning charity into investment and investment into purpose. Chapter 3. The ghost father Tiger was 4 years old when he started asking about the man in his drawings. Mara would find papers scattered around the guest house, crude stick figures made with crayons Miss Opal had bought from the dollar store. There was always a tall figure standing apart from the others. Sometimes the figure had X's for eyes, sometimes it had no face at all, sometimes It was crossed out entirely. "Who's that?" Mara asked one evening, pointing to the tall figure while they ate dinner at the small kitchen table. Tiger looked down at his mac and cheese, pushing the noodles around with his fork. "The ghost." "What ghost, baby?" "The daddy ghost. The one that left." Mara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She'd tried so hard to shelter him from the truth, but children always know. They sense the absence like animals sense storms coming. "Tiger, the kids at daycare have daddies. Why don't I?" Miss Opal, who'd been sitting in her usual chair by the window, looked over at them. She'd been coming to the guest house more often lately, preferring their company to the empty main house. She gave Mara a look that said, "Tell him something true." Mara set down her fork and pulled Tiger onto her lap. "You had a daddy, but he made a choice. He chose other things instead of us." "What things?" "Money." His mother, being comfortable instead of being brave. Tiger was quiet for a long moment, processing this with the seriousness only a 4-year-old can muster. "Is he dead?" "No, baby." "Then why can't we see him?" "Because he doesn't deserve you," Mara thought. "Because he walked away when you were being born. Because he's a coward who chose his inheritance over his own flesh and blood." But what she said was, "Because he chose not to be in our lives, and we're going to be just fine without him." Tiger nodded against her chest, but Mara could feel the question wasn't fully answered. It was a wound that would keep bleeding, she knew. The ghost father who was alive somewhere in the world, but might as well be dead for all the presence he had in Tiger's life. That weekend, Mara saw the newspaper on Miss Opal's kitchen table. The society section. Tim Foster's engagement announcement to Kendra Paulson, some socialite with perfect teeth and a dead husband's fortune. The wedding would be at the Botanical Gardens. 500 guests. The announcement called it the wedding of the season. Mara stared at Tim's photo for a long time. He looked older, tired around the eyes, but still handsome in that way rich men always manage to be, and he was smiling at his new fiancée like she was the only woman who'd ever mattered. "You okay, honey?" Miss Opal asked. "Fine," Mara lied. But she wasn't fine. Something in her chest was burning, a rage she'd kept tamped down for years, suddenly flaring to life. He got to move on. He got to have a wedding and a future and a life where Tiger was just a mistake he'd avoided. "I want to take Tiger somewhere this weekend," Mara said suddenly. "Where?" "Just a park, the one near downtown." Miss Opal looked at her carefully. "Mara." "I need him to see," Mara said quietly. "I need him to see the ghost so he stops haunting us." That Saturday, Mara dressed Tiger in his best clothes and took 2 buses downtown. They walked through neighborhoods that got progressively wealthier until they reached the park across from Tim Foster's mansion. It was one of those private parks with wrought iron fences and security guards, but the public sidewalk offered a clear view. Tim was in his front yard. Mara recognized him immediately, even from a distance. He was playing catch with a little girl, maybe 6 years old. Kendra's daughter from her previous marriage. The girl laughed every time Tim caught the ball, and he was smiling that easy smile of someone whose biggest problem was whether to have the chef make salmon or steak for dinner. "Is that him?" Tiger asked, his small hand tight in Mara's. "Yes, baby." They stood there for 10 minutes, just watching. Tiger was silent, taking in every detail with those eyes that were so much like Tim's. Mara watched her son watching his father, and something broke inside her that had been holding steady for 4 years. Tim looked up. For just a second, his eyes met Mara's across the distance. She saw the recognition flash across his face, saw him freeze with the ball still in his hands. The little girl called to him, but Tim was staring at Mara and the small boy beside her. Tiger lifted his hand in a small wave. Tim didn't wave back. He turned away, said something to the girl, and walked into his house. The door closed with a finality that felt intentional. The ghost disappeared. "Why didn't he wave back?" Tiger asked, his voice so small it broke Mara's heart. Mara knelt down so she was eye level with her son. Because some people are so scared of their own mistakes that they can't even look at them. You are not a mistake, Tiger. You hear me? You are the best thing that ever happened in my life. His loss is my gain. But he's my daddy. No, baby. A daddy is someone who shows up, someone who fights for you, someone who loves you no matter what. That man, he's just biology. He doesn't get the title of daddy. Tiger's eyes filled with tears, and Mara held him right there on the sidewalk, while people walked past with their perfect families and their perfect lives. She held him and promised him that they would be okay. That they would be more than okay. But that night, after Tiger finally fell asleep, Mara stood at the window of the guest house and looked out at the city lights. She thought about Tim in his mansion with his new family, erasing them like they'd never existed, and she made a new promise. Not to Tiger this time, to herself. One day, Tim Foster would see what he'd thrown away. One day he would stand in front of the son he'd abandoned and realize the boy had grown into something extraordinary, something he could never be. One day, the ghost father would become real, and when he did, it would be too late. Mara went to bed that night with something harder forming in her chest. Not just survival anymore, purpose. She was going to raise a warrior, and that warrior was going to make his father weep for what he'd lost. Chapter 4. The Warrior Training. Miss Opal died on a Tuesday afternoon in spring when the cherry blossoms were blooming outside her bedroom window. Tiger was 8 years old, and he'd loved the old woman with the kind of pure devotion children reserve for people who truly see them. She'd taught him to read chapter books, to play chess, to understand that being smart was just as important as being strong. When the cancer finally took her, she died in her sleep in the main house with Mara and Tiger holding her hands. "You take care of each other," were her last words. "And Tiger, baby, you grow up to be the kind of man who makes women feel safe. Not the kind who makes them need shelters." The will reading was quick. Miss Opal had no living relatives, and she'd made her wishes clear. The entire property went to Mara Beatrice, along with a small savings account that held $20,000. The lawyer explained that Miss Opal had been planning this for years, updating her will regularly to ensure everything was in order. "She wanted you to have security," the lawyer said. "She saw something in you." Mara cried for 3 days straight, not just for the loss, but for the gift. After years of doors closing, one woman had opened every door she had. The main house was too big for just the two of them, so Mara rented it out to a nice family and kept the guest house for her and Tiger. The rental income plus her cleaning jobs meant they were finally stable. Not rich, not comfortable, but surviving in a way that didn't require 3 buses and skipped meals. Tiger struggled with Miss Opal's death. He got into fights at school, pushing boys twice his size. The principal called Mara in for the 3rd time in 2 months. "Mrs. Beatrice," "Miss," Mara corrected. "Miss Beatrice, Tiger is a bright boy, one of our best students academically. But he's angry. He needs an outlet before this anger becomes something darker." Mara knew the principal was right. Tiger's rage was growing, feeding on the ghost father and the grandmother who'd loved them, and the unfairness of a world that took good people and let cowards thrive. That's when she met Raphael. He owned a boxing gym 3 blocks from their house, the kind of place with cracked leather punching bags and the smell of sweat and determination. Mara walked in one afternoon after another call from the principal. "You train kids?" she asked the man at the front desk. He was maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair, and the build of someone who'd done hard physical labor his whole life. "I'm Raphael, and yeah, I train anyone who's willing to work. Why?" "My son is 8. He's angry. He needs to learn to channel it." Raphael studied her for a long moment. "Bring him in tomorrow. We'll see what he's got." Tiger showed up the next day in shorts and a t-shirt, small and skinny, and burning with something that made the other kids in the gym stop and stare. Raphael put him in front of a heavy bag and showed him how to throw a basic jab. Hit it like you mean it, Raphael said. Tiger hit the bag once, twice, and then he kept hitting it, tears streaming down his face, all the grief and anger pouring out through his fists. He hit that bag until his knuckles bled and his arms shook, and Raphael finally had to pull him away. "Okay, kid," Raphael said quietly, kneeling down. "Okay, I see you." Raphael told Mara that Tiger could train for free if she'd help with the gym's books. He'd seen her organizing receipts while she waited, noticed her quick math and careful notes. "You're better with numbers than I am," Raphael admitted, "and that boy needs this place. I can see it. He's carrying something too heavy for a kid his age." So Tiger began training every afternoon after school. Raphael worked him hard but fair, teaching him that rage without discipline was just chaos, teaching him that strength without control was just violence, teaching him that being a warrior meant protecting, not destroying. One evening, a few months into training, Tiger came home with a split lip and a black eye. Mara panicked until Tiger grinned through the blood. "I won," he said. "The kid who's been bullying the smaller kids. I stood up to him. Raphael said I did good." Mara wanted to be angry about the fighting, but she saw something in her son's eyes she hadn't seen since Miss Opal died. Purpose, pride, direction. Raphael pulled her aside the next day. "That boy of yours is special. He's got natural talent, but more than that, he's got heart. I've trained a lot of kids. Some have skill, some have strength. Tiger has something else. He fights like he's got something to prove to the world." "He does," Mara said quietly. "The father?" Mara nodded. Raphael was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll train him to be everything that man isn't. Strong, loyal, brave. You just keep loving him the way you do, and we'll raise a hell of a young man." That night, Mara sat with Tiger as he did his homework at the kitchen table. His hands were wrapped in tape from training, his knuckles bruised but healing. "Tiger," she said, "I need to tell you the full truth about your father." Tiger looked up from his math problems, his pencil frozen mid-equation. Mara told him everything: the hospital, the papers, the money thrown on the floor, the blacklist, the ghost father who chose comfort over courage. She told him without crying, without rage, just cold facts that deserved to be known. When she finished, Tiger was quiet for a long time. Outside, the neighborhood kids played in the street, their laughter drifting through the open window. "He doesn't deserve to be called my father," Tiger finally said. "No, baby, he doesn't. But I'm still his son. Biologically, yes. And one day, I'm going to meet him. Not because I need him, but because he needs to see what he threw away." Tiger looked at his mother, with eyes too old for an 8-year-old. "I'm going to make you proud, Mama. So proud that when he sees what we became, it destroys him." Mara pulled her son close, this small warrior with his father's face and his mother's fire. "Baby, you already make me proud, every single day." But she knew Tiger was right. The confrontation was coming. It was inevitable. Written in the stars the moment Tim Foster walked out of that hospital room. And when it came, Mara wanted her son ready. Not just physically strong, but mentally unbreakable. A warrior who knew his worth had nothing to do with the man who'd abandoned him. Raphael trained his body. Mara trained his heart. And Tiger trained himself to be everything his father wasn't. The ghost was going to become real someday. And when he did, he was going to face a reckoning that would shake him to his foundation. Chapter 5. Tim's Empty Life. Tim Foster stood in his dead mother's bedroom and felt absolutely nothing. Gwendolyn had died 3 weeks ago, cancer eating through her with the same relentless efficiency she'd applied to controlling his life. The funeral had been enormous, all the right people saying all the right things, and Tim had stood there in his black suit, shaking hands and accepting condolences, and feeling like he was watching someone else's life unfold. Now he was alone in her room, sorting through her things because the estate lawyer said he needed to, her jewelry, her clothes, her collection of first edition books she'd never actually read. All of it felt meaningless. He opened her desk drawer and found a file folder marked Mistakes. Inside was everything about Mara Beatrice. Hospital records from the day Tiger was born. Private investigator reports tracking her movements over the years. Photos of a small boy growing up in a guest house across town. Recent pictures showed the boy in boxing gloves, maybe 7 or 8 years old, already showing Tim's bone structure in miniature. There were notes in his mother's handwriting. Confirmed blacklist holding. MB still unable to secure professional employment. Subject cleaning houses for cash. Another note, dated years later. Child enrolled in public school. Mother working 3 jobs. No contact attempted with TF. Tim sat down hard on his mother's bed, the file trembling in his hands. His breath came in short gasps as he realized the full extent of what had been done. She'd been tracking them. All these years, his mother had been watching Mara and Tiger like they were a problem she needed to contain, making sure they stayed poor, stayed struggling, stayed away. "Did I do right by you?" Those had been Gwendolyn's last words, asked in a morphine haze 2 days before she died. Tim had assumed she meant his business success, his social standing, his life. Now he understood. She was asking if destroying Mara and abandoning his son had been the right choice. If the blacklist and the cruelty and the years of enforced poverty had been worth preserving the foster family name. Tim had held her hand and said, "Yes, Mother. You did right by me." He'd lied to make a dying woman feel better. But the lie was choking him now, filling his lungs with poison. The phone rang. His ex-wife Kendra, probably calling about some detail of their divorce settlement. They'd lasted 3 years before she realized Tim was fundamentally broken in ways her money couldn't fix. She'd taken half his fortune and her daughter and left him in the mansion that felt more like a mausoleum every day. He let it go to voicemail. Tim pulled out one of the photos of Tiger. The boy was at the park, playing on a swing set, captured in mid-laugh. He looked happy despite everything, despite having no father, despite being poor, despite all of it. He looked like Tim at that age, the same crooked smile, the same way of tilting his head when something amused him, the same dimple in his left cheek, the same everything. "I have a son," Tim said out loud to the empty room. It was the first time he'd said it in 8 years. The words felt strange in his mouth, like a foreign language he'd never learned to speak properly. Tim started drinking that night, and the next night, and the night after that. His therapist, Dr. Shaw, had been suggesting for months that Tim had unresolved issues. Tim had been dodging the conversation because he knew exactly what issues were unresolved. The pregnant woman he'd abandoned in a hospital, the son he'd never met, the choice that had been eating him alive for years. "Tell me about the child," Dr. Shaw said during their next session. "No." "Tim, you can't move forward if—" I said no. Tim stood up, preparing to leave. "You're running," Dr. Shaw said calmly, "just like you ran from that hospital room, just like you run from every real feeling you've ever had. How's that working for you?" Tim sat back down, and for the first time in 8 years, he started talking. He told Dr. Shaw everything. The pressure from his mother, the fear of being cut off from the family fortune, the way Mara had looked at him in that hospital room like she was seeing straight through to his cowardice, the money on the floor, the torn papers, the baby he'd never held. "I dream about that day," Tim admitted. "I dream that I stayed, that I told my mother to go to hell, that I held my son when he was born, and then I wake up and remember I didn't do any of that. I walked away. I chose money over everything that mattered." "You were under tremendous pressure from your mother," Dr. Shaw said. "That's not an excuse. Other men would have fought. I didn't. I was weak. I am weak." "What would you do differently if you could go back?" Tim laughed bitterly. "Everything. I'd do everything differently. I'd marry Mara. I'd hold my son. I'd tell my mother that her money meant nothing compared to them." But he couldn't go back. Time only moved in one direction, and he'd spent 8 years moving further away from the man he should have been. That night, Tim drove to the neighborhood where Mara lived. He'd memorized the address from his mother's file. He sat in his car across the street from the guest house, watching lights move behind the curtains. He saw shadows, a woman and a small figure, his family, the one he'd thrown away. He sat there for an hour before driving home. He did it again the next week, and the week after that, never getting out of the car, never approaching, just watching from a distance like a ghost haunting his own life. One evening, he saw Mara walk out of the house with Tiger. The boy was bigger now, maybe 8 years old, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a boxing gym logo. Mara held his hand as they walked down the street, talking about something that made Tiger laugh. They looked happy, complete, whole. Tim realized with a sick feeling in his stomach that they didn't need him. They'd built a life without him, and it was working. He was the only one drowning. His phone buzzed, a text from his publicist about his upcoming engagement announcement. Senator Ashford's daughter Blair had agreed to marry him after 6 months of careful courtship. It was a strategic match. She needed his money for her political ambitions. He needed her family's connections to rebuild his reputation after the messy divorce from Kendra. There was no love, just mutual convenience, just two people using each other for advancement. Tim looked at the text, then at the house where his real family lived, and felt the full weight of his choices crushing down on him. He was going to marry Blair. He was going to smile for the cameras and play the part of the reformed billionaire. He was going to pretend his life was full. But late at night, in the dark hours when he couldn't sleep, he would know the truth. He had a son he'd never held, a woman he'd destroyed out of cowardice, and a hole in his chest that no amount of money or strategic marriages could ever fill. Tim drove home and poured himself another drink, then another. In his mother's bedroom, the file marked "Mistakes" sat on her desk, full of photos of the life he should have had. And in a small guest house across town, a boy named Tiger fell asleep dreaming of becoming strong enough to punch the ghost father who haunted his drawings. Neither of them knew how soon that dream would become reality. Chapter 6. Tiger's Discovery. Tiger found out who his father really was on a Tuesday afternoon when he was 14 years old. He'd been using the computer at the library to finish a school project about family history. The assignment was simple. Research your family name and find out where your people came from. Most kids were excited about it, tracing lineages back to different countries. Tiger had been dreading it because his family history had exactly one side, his mother's. But curiosity got the better of him. He typed Timothy Foster into the search engine just to see, just to put a real face to the ghost who'd haunted him for 14 years. The results loaded, and Tiger's world tilted on its axis. Timothy Foster, CEO of Foster Tech, net worth $800 million, bachelor, engaged to Blair Ashford, daughter of Senator Richard Ashford. Photos of galas and boardrooms and magazine covers. Articles about his business acumen, his charitable foundations, his perfect life. Tiger scrolled through image after image, his hands shaking. In every photo he saw his own face looking back at him. The same eyes, the same jawline, the same crooked smile when something amused him. There was a photo from years ago. Tim Foster, with his mother Gwendolyn at some society event. The caption mentioned her passing 2 years prior. Another photo showed Tim at his first wedding to someone named Kendra Paulson, both of them looking happy and wealthy and completely untouchable. Not once was there any mention of Mara Beatrice. Not once was there any mention of a son. Tiger had been erased. Carefully edited out of Tim Foster's perfect public life like a mistake that never happened. He printed out the photos on the library printer, spending his last few dollars to have proof. Then he walked home in a daze, the papers clutched in his hands like evidence at a crime scene. Mara was in the kitchen making dinner when Tiger burst through the door. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked with emotion. 14 years of questions finally demanding answers. Mara turned from the stove, saw the papers in his hands, and her face went very still. "Tell you what, baby? That my father is Tim Foster, the billionaire. We've been living like this while he's worth $800 million. Tiger. No! Tiger threw the papers on the table. You let me think he was just some guy, some nobody. But he's not. He's rich. He's famous. He could have helped us all these years, and you never even told me who he was. Mara turned off the stove and sat down at the table, her movements careful and deliberate. Sit down. I don't want to sit down. Sit. Down. Her voice held that tone that meant business, and Tiger sat, his chest heaving with emotion. Mara picked up one of the printed photos, Tim Foster in a tuxedo at some gala. She stared at it for a long moment before looking at her son. You want to know why I didn't tell you he was rich? Because money doesn't make a father, Tiger. Character does. That man has neither. But we struggled. We barely made it. And he had all that money? Yes, he had money. And you know what else he had? A choice. Every single day for 14 years he chose not to be in your life, not because he was poor, not because he couldn't find us, but because he was a coward who valued his comfort more than his son. Tiger's eyes filled with angry tears. I could have gone to private school. We could have had a real house. You wouldn't have had to work 3 jobs. And I would have done it all over again. Mara cut him off. Because that man's money comes with strings, Tiger. It comes with control and manipulation, and the kind of poison his mother Gwendolyn spread her whole life. She's the one who threatened to cut him off if he stayed with us. She's the one who blacklisted me so I couldn't get decent work. She's the one who called you a bastard when you were still in my womb. Tiger was silent, processing this new information that made his father even worse than he'd imagined. I didn't tell you who he was because I didn't want you growing up thinking you were owed something by a man who chose not to know you. I wanted you to build your own strength, your own character, your own life, not living in the shadow of what you could have had if your father had been a better man. But I have a right to know him, Tiger said quietly. Yes, you do. And when you're ready, when you're strong enough to face him without needing him, then you can decide what kind of relationship you want with Tim Foster, but not because he's rich, not because you think you deserve his money, but because you want to look him in the eye and ask him why. Tiger looked at the photos spread across the table, his father at weddings and galas and business dinners, his father smiling for cameras, living a life that Tiger and Mara had never been invited to join. I want to meet him, Tiger said. Mara closed her eyes briefly. She'd known this day would come, had been preparing for it since Tiger was old enough to ask questions, but knowing didn't make it easier. Not yet, she said. Mama. Not yet, Tiger. You're 14. You're angry, you're hurt, and you have every right to be. But if you meet him now, you're going to say things you can't take back. You're going to let your rage control you instead of controlling your rage. Raphael says I'm ready. Raphael teaches you to control your fists. I'm teaching you to control your heart. Mara reached across the table and took her son's hand. When you meet Tim Foster, I want you to be strong enough that he sees what he lost. I want you to be so completely whole that his absence didn't break you. Can you do that? Tiger wanted to say no, wanted to jump up and track down his father right now and scream in his face. But he looked at his mother, saw the years of struggle and sacrifice and fierce love in her eyes, and nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay. But that night, Tiger couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed with his laptop, scrolling through everything he could find about Tim Foster, every article, every photo, every mention. He memorized his father's face, his mannerisms, the way he stood in photos like he owned every room he entered. And Tiger made a promise to himself. He would meet his father. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when he did, Tim Foster was going to answer for 14 years of absence. Over the following weeks, Tiger's training intensified. Raphael noticed the change, the new hunger in every punch, the way Tiger pushed himself past exhaustion. What's driving you? Raphael asked after a particularly brutal session. I found out who my father is, Tiger said, unwrapping his hands. Raphael nodded slowly. And now I know exactly what I'm fighting against. Good, Raphael said. Use that, but don't let it consume you. Revenge is a tool, not a purpose. But Tiger wasn't thinking about revenge yet. He was thinking about the moment he would stand in front of Tim Foster and say, "I'm your son, the one you threw away. Look at what I became without you." That moment was coming. Tiger could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and devastating. And when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 7. The Stalking. Tiger started following his father when he was 15 years old. It began innocently enough, just taking the bus to the neighborhoods where Tim Foster lived and worked, watching from a distance, learning his routines. The coffee shop he visited every morning at 8, the gym where he worked out 3 times a week, the restaurants where he took business meetings, always sitting with his back to the wall. Tiger told himself he just wanted to see the man in person, to make the ghost real. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He was studying his enemy, learning his patterns, preparing for the confrontation that was inevitable. Mara didn't know about the stalking at first. Tiger was careful to do it only when she thought he was at Raphael's gym or the library. But Raphael knew. He caught Tiger mapping out routes on his phone one afternoon, saving locations and times. "You're playing a dangerous game," Raphael said quietly. "I'm just looking." Looking turns into following, following turns into confrontation, and confrontation with the wrong preparation can destroy you both. Raphael sat down beside him on the gym bench. "Your mother raised you to be better than your rage. Don't prove her wrong." "I just need to see him," Tiger insisted. "I need to understand who he is." "You already know who he is. He's a coward who chose comfort over courage. Watching him buy expensive coffee won't change that." But Tiger couldn't stop. The compulsion was too strong, like gravity pulling him toward the man who'd shaped his entire life through absence. Every weekend he would take the bus downtown and watch his father go about his perfect life. Tim Foster moved through the world like someone who'd never made a mistake. Like he'd never abandoned a pregnant woman in a hospital. Like he'd never had a son crying himself to sleep, wondering why his daddy didn't want him. Tiger hated him, but he also wanted desperately for Tim to notice him, to see him, to acknowledge his existence in some way that made him real. One Saturday afternoon in autumn, Tiger was following Tim through the upscale shopping district when Tim stopped suddenly and turned around. Their eyes met across the crowded street. Tiger froze. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, just another teenager in the crowd. But something in Tim's face changed. Recognition flickered, then certainty, then something that looked like pain. Tim took a step toward him. Tiger's heart hammered in his chest so hard he thought it might break his ribs. Then Tim stopped. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. They stood there on opposite sides of the street, father and son, separated by 15 years of absence and a river of traffic. Tiger pulled down his hood so Tim could see his face clearly, see the features they shared, see what he'd abandoned, see the man his son was becoming. Tim's hand came up, reaching across the distance, and Tiger saw his father's face crumble, saw tears in those eyes that looked so much like his own, saw regret so deep it seemed to age him years in seconds. Someone bumped into Tiger, breaking the moment. When he looked back, Tim was walking away, not running, just walking with his shoulders hunched like he was carrying something too heavy. Tiger stood there until Tim disappeared around a corner. Then he sat down on a bench and tried to catch his breath, his hands shaking with adrenaline and emotion and something he couldn't name. That night, Raphael called Mara. "You need to know what Tiger's been doing," he said, and told her everything. Mara confronted Tiger at dinner, not with anger, with fear that manifested as barely controlled panic. "Baby, you can't do this. You can't stalk him like this." "I'm not stalking, I'm just watching." "That's the definition of stalking, Tiger. And it's going to hurt you. Every time you see him living his life without you, it's going to tear open that wound." Mara's voice cracked. "Please, I'm begging you. Stop." "I can't," Tiger whispered. "Mama, I can't. I need to understand why. Why wasn't I enough?" "It was never about you not being enough. It was about him not being brave enough. There's a difference." But Tiger was past listening. The obsession had taken root, and he couldn't pull it out even when he wanted to. The stalking continued for months. Tiger saw Tim's life from every angle, saw him eating alone in expensive restaurants, staring at his phone like he was waiting for a message that never came. Saw him coming home to an empty mansion, lights clicking on in empty rooms. Saw him stand in his driveway sometimes just staring at nothing, like he was lost in his own life. One evening, Tiger followed Tim to a cemetery, watched from behind a mausoleum as his father knelt at Gwendolyn's grave and talked to the headstone like she could hear him. "I should have fought you," Tim said to the marble. "I should have told you to go to hell and stayed with her, with them. But I was so afraid of losing your love that I lost everything that mattered. And now I'm alone, completely alone. Was it worth it, Mother? Was preserving your precious family name worth this?" Tiger heard every word, and something in his chest shifted. His father wasn't happy, wasn't content, was in fact drowning in regret. But it didn't matter. Regret didn't undo 14 years of absence. Regret didn't fix the nights Mara cried when she thought Tiger was asleep. Regret didn't explain away the ghost father who'd haunted his entire childhood. Tiger left the cemetery before Tim saw him, but he carried those words home like stones in his pockets. "Mama," he said that night, "he's miserable." Mara looked up from the book she was reading. "Good. Doesn't that make you feel better?" "No, baby, it makes me sad. Not for him, for what could have been if he'd been brave enough to choose differently." She marked her page and set the book aside. "His misery doesn't fix our past, and it won't build our future. You need to let this go." "I can't let it go until I face him," Tiger said. "Until I tell him everything I've been carrying." "Then when?" Mara asked. "When are you ready for that conversation?" Tiger thought about his father at the grave, confessing to Stone, about the way Tim's hand had reached across the street, about the tears he'd seen. "Soon," Tiger said. "Soon." 3 weeks later, the engagement announcement hit the news. Tim Foster to marry Blair Ashford in a ceremony at the Westmont estate. 500 guests, media coverage, the wedding of the season. Tiger saw the announcement online, and something snapped inside him, like a wire pulled too tight finally breaking. "He's getting married again," he told Mara that evening. Mara's face went very still. "Tiger, I'm going to the wedding." "No, I am, with or without you." Tiger's voice was hard now, all the softness of childhood burned away by years of anger. He doesn't get to keep living his perfect life. He doesn't get to marry another woman and play happy family while we exist out here like we never mattered. "And what are you going to do at this wedding? Make a scene? Ruin his day?" Mara stood up, facing her son, who was now taller than her. "That's not justice, Tiger. That's just rage." "Good," Tiger said. "I've earned my rage, and he's going to face it." Mara looked at her son for a long moment, saw the man he'd become, saw the warrior she'd raised, saw that this confrontation was inevitable and unstoppable, like water finding its way downhill. "If you're going," she finally said, "we're going together." Tiger nodded. Together. And so it was decided. The wedding was in 2 months. 2 months for Tiger to prepare to face his father in front of 500 witnesses. 2 months for Mara to brace herself for reopening wounds she'd spent 15 years trying to heal. 2 months until Tim Foster's perfect world exploded into pieces he'd never be able to put back together. The countdown had begun. Chapter 8. The Wedding Confrontation. The Westmont estate glittered like something out of a fairy tale, all white lights and elegant architecture. Mara Beatrice stood at the entrance in a midnight blue gown that cost more than she usually spent in 3 months. It had been worth every penny to see the look on Tiger's face when she'd emerged from the dressing room at the boutique. "Mama, you look like a queen," he'd said, his voice filled with awe. "Today, baby, we both are royalty." Tiger wore a tailored black suit that made him look older than 16. He'd grown into his height over the past year, now 6 feet tall with his father's build and his mother's fierce eyes. His knuckles were wrapped under his suit jacket, a habit from boxing that he couldn't shake even at formal events. Raphael had wrapped them himself that morning. They had no invitation, but they didn't need one. The security at the gate had looked at Mara's face, then at Tiger's face, then at the guest list, and something in his expression shifted. He waved them through without a word. Maybe he'd seen the photos online from years ago. Maybe he recognized the resemblance that was impossible to miss. Maybe he just knew drama when he saw it walking through the gates. The ceremony had already finished. Guests milled around the garden reception, champagne flowing like water, string quartet playing soft melodies that drifted on the evening breeze. Blair Foster stood near the fountain in her designer wedding gown, laughing with her bridesmaids. Tim was across the garden talking to a group of men in expensive suits, probably discussing business even on his wedding day. Mara and Tiger entered the garden together, arm in arm. The effect was immediate and devastating. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. A woman gasped. The string quartet faltered for a note before continuing, the violinist's bow stuttering across the strings. Everyone who'd been following the speculation online for years knew exactly who they were. The abandoned pregnant woman, the forgotten son, the scandal Tim Foster had tried to bury under money and silence and carefully constructed lies. Tim turned, alerted by the sudden silence. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the stone pathway, crystal exploding like tiny stars. Mara held her head high and walked further into the garden, Tiger beside her, their footsteps echoing in the shocked quiet. She remembered the last time she'd been the center of attention at one of Tim's events. In a hospital gown, in labor, being handed papers to sign away her child's father. This time she wore dignity like armor. Blair approached first, her face flushed with champagne and confusion. "Excuse me, this is a private event, is it?" Mara's voice cut through the garden like a blade. "Because I don't recall getting my invitation. Must have been lost in the mail, along with 16 years of child support." Someone's phone camera flashed, then another. Soon half the guests were recording, holding up their phones like this was entertainment they'd paid to see. Tim started walking toward them, his face white as his boutonniere. "Mara, Tiger, please, we should talk privately." "Privately?" Tiger's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, projected with the confidence Raphael had taught him. "Like you talked to my mother privately in that hospital room, while she was in labor, when you shoved papers at her and threw money on her bed like she was a prostitute?" Blair's face went from confused to horrified. She looked at Tim, her wedding smile crumbling. "What is he talking about?" But Tim couldn't speak. He'd stopped 10 feet from them, frozen like prey that had just spotted a predator. Tiger walked forward until he was standing directly in front of his father. They were the same height now, the same build. Anyone with eyes could see the family resemblance, could see that this boy was Tim Foster's son. "Hello, father," Tiger said, his voice steady despite the rage burning behind his eyes. "I'm Tiger, the son you threw away, the mistake you tried to erase, the bastard as your mother called me." "Tiger, please!" Tim's voice cracked like breaking glass. "No, you don't get to speak yet. You don't get to say please. You don't get to pretend you care now when you didn't care for 16 years. Tiger's hands were shaking, but his voice never wavered. "Do you know what it's like to grow up wondering why your father didn't want you? To watch other kids get picked up from school by their dads while yours was out here playing happy family with someone else's children?" Blair had backed away, her hands over her mouth, her bridesmaids clustering around her in shocked support. The guests pressed closer, hungry for every word of the scandal they'd probably been gossiping about for years. "My mother raised me alone," Tiger continued, his voice getting louder, years of pain transforming into words. "She worked 3 jobs. She lived in a shelter because your mother blacklisted her from every decent job in the city. She cleaned toilets with me, strapped to her back because she had no one else to watch me, while you were here, in your mansion, with your $800 million, living like we didn't exist." Tim's face was wet with tears. "I'm sorry. God, Tiger, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Tiger laughed, a harsh sound that didn't match his age. "You're sorry? My mother almost broke trying to feed me. We almost froze one winter because we couldn't afford heat. We survived on food bank donations and the kindness of strangers, while you donated millions to charity for the tax write-offs. And you're sorry? I was weak. Tim said, his voice barely a whisper. My mother, she threatened to cut me off if I stayed with your mother. She said, I don't care what she said, Tiger roared, and several guests flinched at the raw power in his voice. You chose money over your child. You chose your inheritance over your son, and now you're standing here in your $3,000 suit, marrying another woman, playing happy ever after while my mother is still paying for your cowardice. The garden was dead silent, except for the sound of the fountain and Tiger's ragged breathing. You want to know why I'm here? Tiger asked, quieter now but somehow more terrifying. Not for your money, not for your name. I'm here so that every time you look at your bride, every time you smile for a camera, every time you pretend your life is perfect, you remember this moment. You remember the son you abandoned looking you in the eyes and telling you exactly what you are. A coward. Tim reached out, trying to touch Tiger's shoulder. Please, son. Tiger moved faster than anyone expected, his training with Raphael making the punch clean, precise, devastating. His fist connected with Tim's jaw with a crack that echoed across the garden like a gunshot. Tim went down hard, blood streaming from his mouth, staining his white shirt collar. Security rushed forward, but Mara stepped in front of her son, her arms spread wide. Don't touch him. He just gave his father what he's deserved for 16 years. Tiger stood over Tim, his fists still clenched, breathing hard. He leaned down and whispered something that only Tim could hear. That was for my mother. The rest you owe her directly. Then Tiger straightened, adjusted his jacket like a gentleman after a business meeting, and walked back to where Mara stood waiting. She took his hand. You good, baby? Yeah, Mama. I'm good. They walked out of the garden together, through the crowd that parted like water, past the security guards who didn't dare stop them, and out to the car they'd hired for the occasion. Behind them, Tim Foster lay on the ground of his wedding reception, tasting blood and regret, while his new bride stood frozen in her designer gown, and 500 guests recorded the destruction of his carefully constructed life. The wedding was over. The marriage would never begin, but the reckoning had only just begun. Chapter 9. The Breaking. Tim Foster's wedding disaster went viral within an hour. Videos from a dozen different angles flooded social media, each one capturing a different perspective of his public destruction. Tiger's speech. The punch. Mara standing like a warrior queen in her blue gown. Blair's horrified face. Tim bleeding on the ground. It was everywhere. News outlets, gossip sites, think pieces about billionaire accountability and abandoned children. Celebrity commentators weighing in on whether Tiger was justified. The hashtag #FosterTheDeadbeat trended worldwide for 3 days. Blair left him that night, packed her things from the mansion they were supposed to share, and moved back to her father's house without a word. The engagement ring she'd thrown at him left a dent in his bedroom wall that he couldn't bring himself to repair. It felt like the appropriate monument to his failures. His business partners started distancing themselves, citing reputational concerns in carefully worded emails. Charity boards quietly removed his name from donor lists. Social invitations dried up overnight. His publicist quit via email, not even bothering with a phone call. For the first time in his life, Tim Foster faced real consequences for his choices. He spent the first week drunk, stumbling through his empty mansion, talking to ghosts. The second week, numb, staring at walls and wondering if this was what death felt like. By the third week, he couldn't look at himself in the mirror without seeing Tiger's face, bleeding and beautiful and full of justified rage. He'd lost everything that mattered, and this time there was no one to blame but himself. His mother was dead. His cowardice was his own. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Tim drove to the address he'd memorized years ago, the house where Mara lived. The guest house that his mother's file had documented in painful detail. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. Mara, please. I know you're in there. I just want to talk. The door remained closed, solid and unyielding as his regret. Tim sat down on the porch and waited. The rain soaked through his clothes, but he didn't move. He sat there for 3 hours while the sun set, and the neighborhood kids walked home from school and looked at him with curious eyes. Some recognized him from the videos. One kid actually took a photo. Finally, the door opened. Mara stood there in jeans and a sweater, looking at him with eyes that held no pity, no anger, just cold assessment. "You need to leave." "Please," Tim said. "5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." "You don't get to ask for anything." "I know." Tim struggled to his feet, his legs cramped from sitting in the rain. "I know I don't deserve 5 minutes or 5 seconds, but I'm begging you, let me try to explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made your choice 16 years ago. Everything after that is just you living with consequences." "Mara?" His voice broke on her name, like something fragile shattering. "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't you dare cry at me like you're the victim here. You don't get my sympathy, you don't get my forgiveness, you get nothing." "I don't want your forgiveness," Tim said, water dripping from his hair. "I know I can't have it. I just want you to know that I know what I did. I know I destroyed the best thing in my life. I know I'm a coward. I know every single mistake I made, and I have to live with that every single day." "Good," Mara said coldly. "I hope it eats you alive. I hope you never sleep well again." "It does." Tim wiped his face, rain and tears mixing until he couldn't tell the difference. "Every day, every night. I see your face in that hospital room. I see my son's face at the wedding. I see what I could have had if I'd been brave enough." "But you weren't brave enough. You chose your mother's approval. You chose money. You chose your comfortable life over your family." "I did, and I've spent 16 years regretting it, 16 years knowing I'm a coward." "Your regret is meaningless to me, Tim. It doesn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep. It doesn't undo the years I struggled. It doesn't undo the fact that my son grew up wondering why his father didn't love him enough to stay." "I did love you," Tim whispered. "No," Mara said firmly. "You loved the idea of me. But when it got hard, when it required sacrifice, you ran. That's not love. That's weakness masquerading as affection." Tim nodded, accepting the truth like a knife to the chest, feeling it sink in and knowing he deserved every inch of the blade. "Where do I go from here?" he asked, his voice small. "What do I do?" "That's not my problem to solve. You figure out how to live with what you've done. You figure out how to be a better man than you were. But you don't get to do it in my life or Tiger's life unless he decides otherwise." "Can I talk to him?" "No." "Mara, please." "No, Tim. He's 16 years old. He's been carrying this rage for his entire life, and he finally got to release some of it at your wedding. Now he needs time to process, to heal, to figure out who he is when he's not defined by your absence." "Will he ever want to know me?" "I don't know," Mara said honestly. "That's his choice to make, not mine, not yours, his, and you need to respect that." Tim sagged against the porch railing, looking like he might collapse. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it. You can only accept it." Mara's voice softened slightly, not with kindness, but with tired truth. "You want to be in Tiger's life? Then you prove you've changed. Not with words, not with money, with actions. Consistent, humble, selfless actions over time, maybe years, maybe decades, and even then, he might never forgive you, but that's the price of what you did." "I'll do anything." "Then start by respecting my boundary right now and leaving my porch." Tim nodded. He turned to go, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of him, of what he's become despite me, because of you. Your pride means nothing to him, but if you really mean that, then prove it, from a distance, with patience, without expectation." Tim walked to his car and drove away, leaving Mara standing in the doorway watching him go, her arms crossed against the evening chill. Inside the house, Tiger sat at the kitchen table with Raphael. They'd been there the whole time, listening to every word through the open window. "You okay?" Raphael asked. Tiger nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." "What are you feeling?" Like I finally said what I needed to say. Like the ghost isn't a ghost anymore. He's just a man, a sad, broken man who made terrible choices. Does that make you feel better? A little, Tiger admitted. But mostly it just makes me sad, for what could have been, for the father I should have had. Mara came back inside and pulled Tiger into a hug. You don't have to feel sorry for him. I don't, Tiger said. I feel sorry for us. For all the years we could have had with a father who was brave enough to stay. We survived without him, Mara said fiercely. More than survived. We thrived. I know, Mama. I know. But that night, Tiger lay in bed thinking about his father sitting in the rain, begging for forgiveness that might never come, thinking about the price of cowardice and the weight of regret, thinking about whether he would ever be ready to let Tim Foster try to be something resembling a father. The answer wasn't clear yet, but the anger had loosened its grip slightly, leaving room for something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but possibility, small and fragile and uncertain, but there. The reckoning had begun, but its end was still unwritten, still waiting to be discovered in the days and months and years ahead. Chapter 10. The Warrior's Choice. 7 months passed before Tiger saw his father again. They were 7 months of silence during which Tim Foster lived in the shadow of his public shame and private regret. 7 months where Tiger finished his junior year of high school, won the state boxing championship, and started receiving full scholarship offers from universities across the country. The local newspaper ran a feature on Tiger with the headline, "From Shelter Baby to State Champion, Tiger Beatrice's Inspiring Journey." They interviewed Mara, Raphael, even some of Tiger's teachers. The article went viral, smaller than the wedding disaster, but meaningful in different circles. Tim read it alone in his mansion, read about Miss Opal who'd given them a home, about Raphael who'd trained Tiger for free, about Mara working 3 jobs and still finding time to help Tiger with homework. He started volunteering at Raphael's gym, showed up one Tuesday evening and asked if he could help. Raphael, after a long look that saw straight through him, said yes. Tim mopped floors, cleaned equipment, fixed broken bags, and did whatever needed doing without complaint. The kids at the gym knew who he was. Some ignored him, some glared. Tiger's story had become neighborhood legend. Tim took it all without defending himself. He wrote letters to Tiger that he never sent. Dozens of them, pouring out apologies and explanations that felt hollow. He kept them in a drawer, a confession no one would ever read. He showed up at Tiger's boxing matches, sitting in the back row where he wouldn't be noticed. Watched his son fight with grace and power, watched him win again and again. Tiger knew he was there, could feel his father's presence, but he never acknowledged him. Not yet. One evening, Raphael pulled Tiger aside. Your father's been coming here 6 nights a week for 7 months. Hasn't missed a day, just works. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to decide. This limbo isn't good for anyone. I don't owe him anything. No. But you owe yourself peace. That Saturday, Tiger had his final match before graduation. The gym was packed. Mara sat in the front row wearing the same blue dress from the wedding. Tiger won in the 3rd round with a knockout that had the crowd on their feet. In the chaos of celebration, Tiger looked toward the back row. Tim was there, standing, tears streaming down his face. Their eyes met, held. Tiger made a decision. After the ceremony, Tiger found his father in the parking lot. Tim was leaning against his car, clearly waiting. You've been coming to my matches, Tiger said. Tim straightened. Yes. And volunteering at Raphael's gym. Yes. Why? Because I'm trying to be present. Even if you never want me in your life, I wanted to show up. Tiger crossed his arms. You think 7 months fixes 16 years? No. Nothing fixes that. I'm just trying to be better than I was. Silence for a moment. I'm going to college in the fall, Tiger said. Full scholarship to state. I know. Congratulations. When I come back for Christmas break, you can take me to dinner. One dinner. You talk, I listen. After that, I decide if you get another chance. Tim's breath caught. Thank you. Don't, Tiger cut him off. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because my mother raised me to be better than my anger. But understand, you hurt her again, you disrespect her. You think this means you're forgiven? I will destroy you in ways that Wedding Punch was just a preview of. I understand. Do you? You're not my father. You're just Tim Foster, the man who shares my DNA. If you want to be more than that, you earn it, every single day, with no guarantee. I understand, Tim repeated. Tiger nodded. December. I'll text you the details. He started to walk away, then turned back. And Tim, don't come to my graduation. That day is for the people who actually raised me. Okay, Tim whispered. Tiger walked back to where Mara stood waiting by their car, watching the whole exchange from a distance that allowed her son his moment. You okay? She asked, searching his face for answers. Yeah, Mama. I'm okay. Better than I thought I'd be. One dinner. One dinner, to see if he's changed, to get answers to questions I've been carrying, that's all. Nothing more, nothing less. Mara pulled her son into a hug that lasted longer than usual. You're a better person than I am, baby. I learned from the best. You taught me that. They drove home together, leaving Tim standing in the parking lot with the first real hope he'd felt in 16 years. It was small and conditional and might shatter at any moment, but it existed. It was real. It was more than he deserved. The graduation came and went in June. Tiger gave a speech about perseverance and single mothers and the community that raises warriors when fathers disappear. Mara cried proud tears that she didn't bother to hide. Raphael cheered louder than anyone, his voice hoarse by the end. Tim watched from his car outside the stadium, respecting the boundary Tiger had set, watching through binoculars as his son walked across that stage, and knowing he had no right to be closer. Summer passed in a blur of preparation. Tiger trained harder than ever, preparing for college boxing. He spent time with friends who'd become family through the years. He didn't think about his father much, and when he did, it was with something closer to indifference than rage. The anger had cooled to something manageable, something he could carry without it crushing him. The ghost had become a man, flawed and broken and desperately trying to change. Whether that change was real or just another performance remained to be seen. In December, after his first semester at State, where he'd gone undefeated in the ring and maintained a perfect GPA, Tiger sent a text. Saturday, 7 p.m., Antonio's downtown, come alone. Tim arrived 15 minutes early, wearing casual clothes instead of his usual expensive suits. No watch that cost more than a car. No symbols of the wealth that had cost him everything. He ordered water and waited, hands trembling slightly on the table. Tiger arrived exactly at 7, punctual as always, sat down across from his father in the booth, looked him in the eye without flinching. Start talking, Tiger said, his voice steady, and don't lie. I'll know if you're lying. Tim took a breath and began telling the truth he should have told 16 years ago, about his mother's control that had started when he was young and never ended, about his fear of losing everything he'd known, about his cowardice in that hospital room, about every choice that led to that moment, and every day since that he'd regretted it with every fiber of his being. Tiger listened without interruption, asked hard questions that made Tim flinch, accepted nothing at face value, pushing back on every excuse, every justification. By the end of dinner, 2 hours had passed. Tiger hadn't forgiven anything, but he understood more. Understanding wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. I'm not ready to call you Dad, Tiger said as they stood to leave, pulling on his jacket. Maybe I never will be. Maybe that word is reserved for Raphael, who was there. But I'm willing to see if you can be someone worth knowing, someone worth having in my life in some capacity. That's more than I deserve, Tim said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't hide. Yeah, Tiger agreed without hesitation. It is. Way more. They parted ways with no hug, no handshake, just an acknowledgement that they'd see each other again. Maybe next month, maybe next year, on Tiger's terms, always on Tiger's terms. That was the deal, take it or leave it. Mara was waiting when Tiger got home for winter break. He told her everything about the dinner, while she made hot chocolate the way she used to when he was small. "You really okay with this?" she asked, studying her son's face in the kitchen light. "I don't know yet, but I'm okay with trying to find out. I'm okay with seeing if he can be better than he was." That night, Mara looked at her son and saw a warrior who'd learned that strength wasn't just about fighting. It was about choosing your battles wisely, about knowing when to throw a punch and when to extend a hand, even when that hand wasn't yet ready to fully open, about being strong enough to give chances without being weak enough to forget what was done. Tim Foster hadn't earned forgiveness, might never earn it. The debt was too large, the wound too deep, but he'd earned a chance to try proving he'd changed, and that was all anyone could ask for after abandoning a child for 16 years. The reckoning wasn't over. It would continue for years, maybe decades, as Tim tried to build something from the ruins of his cowardice. As Tiger decided day by day whether the man who'd abandoned him deserved any space in his life. But on that December night, in a small house where a mother had raised a king, with nothing but love and determination and a refusal to quit, there was peace of a sort. The kind of peace that comes from surviving the worst and building something beautiful anyway. The kind that says, we won. Not because he came back, but because we never needed him to come back. We built our victory without him. Tiger Beatrice had grown into a warrior, and warriors choose their own destiny. His father would have to earn every second of time in that destiny, one dinner at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one humble action at a time, years of consistency to prove the change was real. And maybe someday far in the future, if Tim Foster proved he'd truly changed, if he showed up consistently for years without demanding anything in return, Tiger might let him be part of something bigger than regret. But today, Tiger was whole, complete, unbroken, a champion in the ring and in life. And that was the only victory that mattered. The end to where Mara stood waiting. She'd been watching from a distance. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, Mama, I'm okay." "One dinner?" "One dinner. To see if he's changed, that's all." Mara pulled her son into a hug. "You're a better person than I am. I learned from the best." Summer passed. Tiger trained, prepared for college. Tim watched from his car outside the stadium at graduation, respecting the boundary. In December, Tiger sent a text. "Saturday, 7 p.m., Antonio's downtown. Come alone." Tim arrived 15 minutes early, wearing casual clothes. He ordered water and waited. Tiger arrived exactly at 7, sat down, looked him in the eye. "Start talking," Tiger said. Tim took a breath and began, about his mother's control, his fear, his cowardice, every choice that led to that hospital room. Tiger listened, asked hard questions. By the end of dinner, he hadn't forgiven anything, but he understood more. "I'm not ready to call you Dad," Tiger said as they left. "Maybe I never will be, but I'm willing to see if you can be someone worth knowing." "That's more than I deserve," Tim said. "Yeah," Tiger agreed. "It is." They parted with no hug, no handshake, just an acknowledgement they'd see each other again. Maybe next month, on Tiger's terms, always on Tiger's terms. Mara was waiting when Tiger got home. He told her everything. "You really okay with this?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm okay with trying to find out." That night, Mara looked at her son and saw a warrior who'd learned that strength wasn't just about fighting, it was about choosing battles wisely. Tim Foster hadn't earned forgiveness, might never earn it, but he'd earned a chance to try proving he'd changed. The reckoning wasn't over. It would continue for years as Tim tried to build something from the ruins of his cowardice. But on that December night, there was peace. The kind that comes from surviving the worst and building something beautiful anyway. Tiger Beatrice had grown into a warrior. And warriors choose their own destiny. His father would have to earn every second in that destiny, one dinner at a time. And maybe someday, if Tim proved he'd truly changed, Tiger might let him be part of something bigger. But today, Tiger was whole, complete, unbroken, and that was the only victory that mattered.